And then we get the iconic ending to Raw with CM Punk and Seth Rollins.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, I already made a video on this last night at like 2 a.m, so that was cool.
That's what you put out.
Yeah, fuck yeah. I had to talk about it. That shit was legendary, iconic. That's what real wrestling is.
Absolutely.
Seth taking shots at Punk, going to AEW, going to Colt Cabana's podcast. They got personal. CM Punk talking about his hatred for Vince McMahon, but loving the WWE. And, you know, just basically the best way to explain this segment was it was just a masterpiece.
There were just some things that I felt like could have been left out.
Like what?
I don't like the whole. So, okay, there's if you're again, this felt like one that was just catering to a certain audience. Obviously, the old school fans who know the storyline of CM Punk and everything that happened, not realizing that there are people that actually don't know what happened. Like, there's kids that have no idea what's happening.
Okay.
So, with the Colt Cabana thing, if you look back at that, there was no reaction to that. Nobody knew what they were talking about. When you mention the competition and you say the competition, okay, that rings in your head a little bit. Again, it feels like, especially at the live shows, let me just say that it's the live shows where it happens most. Because again, Twitter and YouTube and everything like that, we know what happened.
Yeah.
Right? But WW or like the live audience itself may not, because a lot of the times it is just the casual fan who probably hasn't picked up WWE in so many years. So I personally just felt like maybe that Colt Cabana line, like I get it, you're shooting on live TV and stuff like that, and for us it's really cool. But that live audience, they just looked dead. They were like, "What is he talking about?" Like, if you look back at that reaction, that specific reaction to that, there was absolutely none.
So here's the thing, right? When wrestlers are shooting on each other,
yeah,
it feels real.
For sure. And it did.
If you're a little kid watching that and you didn't know what happened, that's completely fine.
Yeah.
Just like when Hangman Page did the same thing to CM Punk in their little promo, you know.
I think it's just the exciting factor. I think as a kid, you can enjoy the excitement of it.
Yeah, I think you don't really need to know the context of it other than the fact that what they're talking about is real shit.
Right, and it's something that matters if you listen back to the crowd even throughout the segment.
It's the forbidden thing. Chris in the chat says, it's real hate between Punk and Rollins. I genuinely don't believe they genuinely hate each other. I don't think they're like bestest of friends anymore. But what I would say too is they've done such a really good job of making me believe that they just fucking absolutely hate each other.
Well, I'll be honest with you. I made a TikTok last night around midnight when I got back. And in the TikTok, I said, I do believe that there was once probably bad blood between these guys. Yeah. I do think that at one point there was some type of hatred, but you have to be absolutely absurd to think that these guys haven't sit down and talked, figured things out, worked it over, figured out hey, I'm going to say this, I'm going to do. You're absolutely absurd. These guys are going into business together. They're going to make a lot of money. CM Punk said it. Seth Rollins, I'm here to tell you, wants to make that money too. These guys, they are going in with a heavy, it's just very, this is the playing field, and both of them are on the same line, and they understand how this is supposed to play out. And ultimately, I don't think that there is any type of bad blood. But back to what you said, yes, they've done a great job at making me personally feel like, oh, they hate each other.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
And this is a genuine question I'm going to ask you, and then I think everybody else in the community can answer. Why was it that WWE has figured out a way to implement real-life drama? And let's say Punk and Rollins genuinely do hate each other. Why is it that they were able to do this, and we don't hear any reports of them fighting backstage? But then in AEW, they could have never figured out a way to make money. Why? Why was this a situation where AEW, because the reality is that AEW had their drama with Punk and they never were able to sit down together and figure out a way to make money from this. And then you have WWE who leaned into it from the minute that CM Punk arrived. They literally leaned into the fact that this guy is a cancer to the locker room. And last night when I see Seth Rollins and Punk, they are making me believe that they genuinely hate each other. Now, is that hatred really true? Does it truly exist? We're not backstage. We don't know.
We're not hearing any reports about it.
We're not hearing any reports about it, and we're not hearing about any issues, which tells me that Punk, at the very least, if they do have issues, he was able to go out there and just do what's best for business. If that heat is legitimate between the two, he was able to show us that Punk could be mature enough to say, go ahead, because obviously, what ended up happening was Rollins took shots at him for the Colt Cabana podcast. He took shots at him for leaving WWE. He took shots at him for going to AEW. He got pretty personal with Punk, and Punk was able to go there. And there's been no reports of any issues between them after this. But for some reason, we hear of issues between him and AEW. It leads to a whole bunch of fighting. And then on top of that, AEW never figured out how to make money from it. And that is the biggest difference between WWE and AEW. And maybe that is the biggest difference for Punk being in WWE versus being in AEW.
So here's the answer, right? When you have a boss, right? And that boss does not give you, so let me just put it like this. Let me focus in here. If I had a boss at McDonald's, right? Say I worked at McDonald's. If I had a boss at McDonald's who sat on his phone in his office, didn't really care about anything, just kind of sat there, twiddled his thumbs on his phone, I would probably walk past him every day and I would do the bare minimum kind of the same way he did, right? But if I go into a job, like a corporate company, for instance, I'll go into a corporate company and my boss walks up to me and says, hey, this is what you're going to do. This is how you're going to do it. Chances are I'm going to listen to him over the person twiddling their thumbs. Now, here's the next thing. Tony Khan, we always knew, was a fan of CM Punk. That was very upfront and clear. So it's very easy for somebody like CM Punk. And it's, again, it's human nature. People do it all the time. Oh, I'm here. This guy, obviously, and I'm not saying this is what CM Punk did. This guy, I'm here. This guy's a fan of me. I'm just going to kind of do as I please because there's no real direction. You know what I mean? So I'm just going to kind of do as I please. Like you said in the beginning, when he walked into the WWE, there was an immediate direction for him. Mm-hmm. When it came to everything else, we talked about, I remember a couple years ago, it might have been right before he left AEW, the talk of like, oh yeah, you can do Punk and Omega at All In. And the fact like AEW never capitalized on something like that is sickening. But the moment he walked back into WWE, you immediately get him and Rollins. Immediately, because you knew that is the match that people wanted to see. Because every time people fantasy book, who did they fantasy book with? Roman or Rollins, because we know the storyline. We know how that all played out. We know the Shield members, right? So overall, I think, again, it goes back to just one simple thing of Tony Khan is a fan of pro wrestling and not a boss. He doesn't know how to be a boss of pro wrestling just yet. Floor is yours.
I think that's a fair point. I think if you really want to look at the differences between WWE and AEW, this perfectly summarizes the truest differences. Forget about booking. Forget about Tony Khan's decision making. Forget about the sickos. Forget about all of that, right? Let's just specifically talk about the nature of the business and how they view the business. WWE figured out how to capitalize money off of CM Punk's being a cancer in the locker room and that reputation. And what AEW did instead was drive him away. And they did so because, sure, maybe there was reported backstage fights. Maybe there was a lot of drama. There was a whole bunch of leaks, whatever it may be. WWE was focused immediately on CM Punk coming in. And I mean, you could tell from the reactions of Drew and Seth and everybody, it was very clear that they can capitalize on that. And I think WWE has done a really good job in 2024 capitalizing on that. It led to an amazing storyline with Drew McIntyre. which then
Absolutely.
ultimately got personal. Then it finally led to the seeds being planted between him and Seth, and then we get the face-to-face. And listen, at the end of the day, WWE's mentality is let's figure out a way to make money. And I think AEW's mentality was let's figure out a way to get him out of the company. And maybe CM Punk didn't want to be in AEW, and that's completely fine. But obviously, when you look at the two companies, there is a huge difference. WWE's focus was making the money and trying to capitalize off of it. AEW's focus was let's drive them away. And by driving them away, what did they do? They lost even more potential to make money. They alienated an audience. And I know this is going to really bother the sickos. This is going to bother the sickos to their very core. But I remember when I made those videos and live streams of CM Punk coming to WWE, I was met with a lot of comments from people that said, he's going to fight in WWE. He's going to be a cancer in their locker room. Guys, CM Punk was never going to do that because he knew at the end of the day, it would be his last straw. So at the end of the day, what ended up happening was when the decision was made for Punk to say, I am going to get everything in line and I'm going to work with these guys and we're going to make money regardless of feelings, right? I think there was a true essence to that. And I think AEW could have done the same thing with Punk if everybody sat down, but nobody sat down with him. They didn't do these meetings. And after so much time had passed, all you saw was leaks and problems and drama. And at that point, you no longer want to sit at that table. And I'm going to read a quote to you because I think this is a very, very good quote. I apply it in real life. And this is one of my favorites that I like. But I genuinely believe this is a good one. God has removed you from a table where you used to sit in order to save you from a host who was serving you poison. Ladies and gentlemen, surround yourself with people who are like-minded and good people. And at the end of the day, when you sit with the right people, you do the right things. And that is the best parts of life. I think what we've seen from AEW is nobody wanted to sit down and save you from the poison. They were the poison. And AEW, that's where they screwed up. And that was the difference between them and WWE.
I have no argument to that. I mean, what do you want me to say?